It's been 3 years since Kim Namjoon, also known as RM, the leader of the band BTS, released his second solo mixtape titled Mono. Among the BTS fanbase, the playlist is known for its calming and comforting vibes, for being atmospheric as well as introspective and vulnerable. Mono deals with themes of melancholy, the search for the true self, loneliness, and homesickness. The 7 tracks were all written by Namjoon himself, and he also greatly participated in producing, arranging, and composing them. Today I am delving deep into the lyrics of Mono, but I will simultaneously look at the music production as well as some background information I have gathered. I want to explore what Namjoon was trying to say, how he said it, and what feelings he sparks in his audience. Because Mono is a rather personal and introspective body of work, I need to quickly introduce Namjoon himself for anyone who doesn't know who he is. Kim Namjoon is, as I said, the leader and the main rapper of the South Korean band BTS. He was born in 1994 and grew up in a Korean city named Ilsan near Seoul, or Ilsan-donggu respectively. Before he signed a contract at Big Hit Entertainment, now called Hype Entertainment, in 2010 and debuted with BTS in 2013, he was already an underground rapper. Mono is his second solo album after he published his self-titled mixtape RM back in 2015. RM is in comparison to Mono more aggressive and focused on a display of Namjoon's skills as a rapper. It was a giant fuck you to all of those people who called him talentless and not a real rapper due to being an idol. That's not to say there weren't any introspective and philosophical lyrics in RM as well, but Mono focuses on his inner emotional experience much more than RM did. Mono is also more indie inspired in comparison to RM, which is raw hip-hop. As of September 2021, Namjoon has 177 KOMCA credits, which makes him the second and youngest most credited songwriter in KOMCA's history. Here are some of the songs he has writing credits on, excluding the ones on Mono and RM. If there is any BTS song you love, chances are high Namjoon has helped writing it. And these songs aren't even including credits for music production. Before I delve deep into my analysis, I have to put up a few disclaimers. I won't exclusively use the term speaker when talking about the lyrical narrator of these songs. You'll often hear me say Namjoon says or Namjoon talks about, but please know that when I use his name, I primarily refer to him as the lyricist and rapper of these songs. Of course, the lines between lyrical speaker, artist, rapper, and lyricist are blurry, and in a way these songs are very personal. However, this video is in no way meant to psychoanalyze Namjoon. Even though he put a lot of himself into this playlist, we don't know where his real thoughts and feelings end and where the creation of a lyrical speaker begins. Even though Mono is introspective and shows vulnerability, there is still a difference between the individual Kim Namjoon and his artistic self-expression or the persona he builds in his music. A lot of sentiments in these songs might have not even been true to him between 2016 and 2018 when he worked on the playlist, and they will be even less true to him now. And even less of what I interpret will align with his thoughts and intentions. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. That being said, the text in itself is largely very open for interpretation. Namjoon left a lot of blanks. He did a live stream on the platform VLive after Mono was published where he gave insight into the process of making the album, and although he talked a lot about the production of the songs, he didn't talk about his intentions or meanings of the lyrics at all. He also said that in school he didn't like when teachers would define the meaning of certain expressions in poems without acknowledging the option that the author might have left it blank or with a double meaning for a reason, or that they might have just liked a specific word. That is why he didn't release official lyrics to his songs. He hoped that people could interpret and understand his music in each their own language and expressions, and that every person would fill up the blanks for themselves. That means my analysis is also just that, my analysis. I don't pretend like I figured it all out, I am merely presenting one way of interpreting these songs, and Namjoon may have meant something else entirely. So please share with me your interpretations. I think when it comes to art, seeing different perspectives and ideas is one aspect of the beauty of it. And even if it is wrong to present one interpretation of art as the right one, as some schools and teachers might do, it would also be wrong to not speculate at all. It would be a shame to not get into a conversation about what Namjoon tried to express with these songs, or at least what our perception of them are and what they make us feel and think. And I hope that this video could start such a conversation. So without further ado, let's get into the interpretation of the playlist. Namjoon didn't just leave blanks in the lyrics, he also chose a simple cover rather than a complicated one, just for that reason of leaving blanks. It is monochromatic, which is also a callback to the title of the album. The word mono originates in Greek and means alone, sole, single, or one. It could also mean lonely or lonesome, and it is the opposite of stereo if you see it from a technical point of view. Other associations of the word are monologue or monochrome. Especially the word's association of loneliness fits the playlist very well. And one anagram of mono is moon, which could be linked to the third title of the playlist, and the image of the moon in the night sky also fits the theme of loneliness. The duo Hon, who collaborated with Namjoon on the second track of the album, said in an interview that the name Mono also means Rap Monster no more. I have no other source that would support that statement, and I am not sure whether Namjoon intended this connection. If you see it like Rapmon No, with Rapmon being his nickname, it makes more sense to me. It could just mean that the monster is no more, but the rap carries on. For anyone who doesn't know, Namjoon changed his stage name back in 2017 from Rap Monster to RM, which stands for Real Me. So in a way it would make sense because in my opinion his growth from Rap Monster to RM is also represented in mono. Just like the cover, the tracklist he published is also monochromatic. It reflects the song's melancholic and gloomy feeling. Another thing that stands out is that the words seem to be handwritten, and it looks like they were written by a non-dominant hand. Research shows when you write with your non-dominant hand, there is a greater access to the right hemisphere brain functions, such as feelings, intuition, gut instincts, or inner wisdom. The untrained hand might also bring out our inner child, and it might result in thinking differently and becoming more creative when both of the brain's hemispheres are active. This introspection and connectivity with the self fits well with the themes of the album, and while I can't be 100% sure that's what Namjoon thought of when making the cover and tracklist, at the very least, using handwritten letters just feels very personal and intimate, which also fits the theme of mono. You may have noticed that on both the cover and the tracklist, the word mixtape is scratched out and instead replaced with playlist. Namjoon also called it a playlist in his livestream. In the hip-hop industry, there are usually two different forms of publication media, the first being an album and the second one a mixtape. They hold different expectations, however Namjoon chose to not go with either of them because neither of them reflected how he saw mono and how it was promoted. It is not for sale and the promotion was minimal. He didn't release a teaser for mono, just published it a few days after announcing the tracklist, and he himself didn't appear in the music videos. The title of mixtape was pointless, to quote Namjoon, and instead he called it a playlist, because it was released just like other playlists are on sites like SoundCloud. And after already releasing a mixtape, he didn't feel like he had to insist on the title of mixtape for mono. Mixtapes are usually free of charge, but they are made with the intent to gain new fans and to get monetary success or to propel the rapper's career in the long run, and they are not as thought through or planned out as a full-length studio album. It speaks volumes that Namjoon chose to not put that label on mono. By calling it a playlist, he also gives the impression that mono is not only his but ours, just like you share playlists with your friends or other people. Tokyo is, in Namjoon's words, undoubtedly an intro. What he could have meant by that is that this song set the tone very well for what is to come. Tokyo is melancholic and slow as well as atmospheric, and we get a first glimpse of introspection and vulnerability. It asks you to slow down and take your time to listen to what Namjoon has to say. In addition, Tokyo already references lines that will come up in later songs. It is the only song on the album that is entirely written in English. Namjoon didn't release any official lyrics, so there are multiple lines whose meanings are up to debate. This ambiguity is exactly what Namjoon wanted when he talked about leaving blanks. It is up to you to decide what the song could mean, because more than mere words that could be debated about, this whole song is very ambiguous and open for interpretation. It vaguely deals with themes of homesickness and not belonging, and it could also be interpreted as a song about a breakup, or at least about being separated from a lover. I remember when I first listened to the song, I thought that it was about a past relationship, maybe with someone in Tokyo, but the fact that the song was already called Tokyo when the guide version was given to Namjoon by a big hit producer goes against this theory. I don't think that Tokyo can be closely linked with real-life events in Namjoon's life. But without further ado, let's look at the actual song. It starts with noises of driving cars that reoccur later in the song as well, which immediately paints a picture of a city in the listener's mind. At the beginning, the noise runs from left to right in the earphones, enhancing this effect even more. It really takes you into the scenery that it paints. Then there is a metallic clang which demands your attention, and in the next moment, a soft melody on a piano is played. This melody also extends through the entire song, which makes it sound familiar, comforting, and calming as well. But due to being in minor key, the melody automatically sounds more melancholic. In the following, I will always show you the lyrics in whole verses first before I go through it line by line so that you can hit pause and read for yourselves. I want you to have the chance to come to your own conclusions before I present you my thoughts. In this case, for Tokyo, I would even recommend listening to the song on your own, thinking about what words you hear. The whole playlist is opened with the act of waking up. I just love that for some reason. We are only 8 words in, and there is already so much to discuss. I have seen different attempts to understand what Namjoon says in this line, namely torso, tourist, so, and torn soul. Tourist would fit very well with being in a foreign city and could symbolize that the speaker doesn't feel like he belongs in Tokyo, which also makes sense in regards to a later line where the speaker states that he is feeling homesick. Hearing a so at the end of the line leading into the next, I know it's time to go, would actually make sense. Torn soul, on the other hand, would fit the theme of inner turmoil, of not feeling like oneself, and again being linked with different locations, feeling torn between Tokyo and Seoul, for instance. And then, being a torso means to be viable, if one would include a head, but that you're incomplete. Without legs and arms, you will always be handicapped and constricted. It goes well with the theme of not feeling in the right place or like oneself. Now the speaker feels the urge to go somewhere else, but if he really was a torso, he couldn't move. I'm not sure what Pinocchio stands for. Pinocchio is at first a puppet and thus controlled by others. Maybe that's the association Namjoon wanted to provoke. He could also reference him because Pinocchio lies, since that is usually the first thing people think of when hearing the word Pinocchio. But Pinocchio is also made out of wood, he's not a real boy and fake in some way. The poncho is even harder to make sense of, at least for me. It could just be a way of painting a picture of difficulties Pinocchio, or the speaker himself, has to face, like rain or storms, and therefore wearing a warm piece of clothing like a poncho. Apart from that, I'd like to point out the alliteration of Pinocchio and poncho, both starting with the same letter and rhyming as well, and that is just one of the many examples that show how phonetically pleasing Namjoon's writing is. The speaker wonders if he misses himself, which can be seen in correlation to the line before, being Pinocchio some time ago, or if he misses your face. We don't know if he's talking about another person. For all I know, he could also be referring to his own past self, his own face, especially if you look at the lines before. Then follows an instrumental break in which we hear the familiar piano melody, now also being hummed by Namjoon. I wouldn't say that what follows after the break is a second verse, because there is no real structure to the song so that it could be divided into a chorus or verses. Instead, it just flows and reflects this stream of consciousness writing. This style of ongoing thoughts that stream out of the speaker's mouth is also enhanced by Namjoon's way of rapping in the song, which is actually not pure rap at all, but rather a mixture of singing, speaking, and rapping. The way he delivers his lines sounds very unconstrained and drifty, and is like he's just thinking out loud. He uses a mixture of talking, singing, and rapping in all of the songs on this playlist, sometimes doing 2 of these things atop of each other when he is harmonizing with himself. In the next 4 lines, the speaker talks about the momentariness of everything, of life itself. For the first line, the interpretation I saw the most was, life is a word that sometimes you cannot say. But the way Namjoon pronounces it, he could also be saying, life has a way that sometimes you cannot see. Let's start discussing the first option. Why is life a word that cannot be said? Well, if we recognize there is life, we must also recognize there is death, and usually that's really uncomfortable. It's easier to ignore its presence. Ash in the next line also makes the listener think of deceased people being cremated and forcing the theme of death. This concept of life and death, that life dictates death and one must exist for the other one to exist, reminds me of another track on the album of Forever Rain, where Namjoon says, I don't live because I can't die. We will discuss this line later in more detail. Even on his first mixtape, Namjoon wrote about life and death. In one song that is, very appropriately, called Life, he wrote, were we born to live, were we born to die? Are we living to die, or are we dying to live? The name tag with me on it, is that life, or is it death? Who knows? Here exists another, even if slightly different, mutual dependence between life and death. In the song Adrift, which is from his first mixtape as well, Namjoon writes, the fact that I was born is frightening, death hurts too badly, and the present is too desolate. This sorrow about the present and even the future can be found in Tokyo as well. There is even another song where he talks about life and death, and that is 4 O'Clock, which he collaborated with his band member V for. There he says, "Yes, we're living and dying at the same time." Once again, he's playing off the complicated relationship between life and death. It's interesting to see that this theme runs through Namjoon's entire discography. So, coming back to this line, all of these sorrows, both about living now and in the future, as well as the prospect of death, would be avoided if we just ignored that there's something like life or death by not speaking this word. But, as Namjoon states in the next line, someday we will all be ash, even if we try to avoid thinking about death. The other possible line, "life has a way that sometimes you cannot see," could just refer to the hidden ways life works sometimes. Even if we plan ahead, things might turn out completely different. Again, this line too would make sense with the following, "When tomorrow comes, how different is it going to be?" I think we all heard the saying that the line between love and hate is thin. Both are extremely strong emotions that can, because they are so intense, quickly turn into the other one. I have heard someone say the opposite of love is not hate but indifference, which totally made sense to me. So hate is actually closer to the feeling of love because you're not indifferent to the thing or person you hate. The dynamic between love and hate will come up in the next song as well. For now, putting this line in context isn't easy because the song really resembles a stream of consciousness and doesn't have a clear central thread. Maybe the relationship of life and death that the speaker discussed before now led into the relationship of love and hate, for both are seemingly opposites, nevertheless cannot be separated. Or in relation to the line, "When tomorrow comes, how different is it going to be?" This one could be interpreted in the context of a relationship. The relationship blurs the line of love and hate, so the speaker wonders what tomorrow will bring, if the relationship will survive, or if it will be healthy. In the last part of this song, the speaker talks about homesickness and of not being where he wants to be, of being separated from someone or something. I hear the word babe in this part, which could indicate that the song is about a lover or a former partner, but I have seen other lyrics where people wrote, "I can't sleep, homesick, but I just want to stay right next to you." Namjoon really got his way. Because of this ambiguity, the song could be both about a specific relationship as well as about a person talking to another version of themselves, and another abstract feeling like not being who one wants to be. The line, "I can't sleep," is a callback to the first line and solidifies the fact that the speaker is in the same situation he was in when he started to speak. I see someone waking up in the middle of the night in a foreign city, wanting to sleep but being unable to, and having these existential questions about life and death roaming through their mind, an instance I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. The speaker goes on to say, "If I could choose my dream, I just want to stay right next to you," which indicates that he is in fact not able to choose his dream and not able to get or do what he wants. At the end, we hear, next to the piano and beat, the sound of shamisen. I hope I pronounced that correctly, which is a traditional Japanese instrument. Using it was Namjoon's idea. I don't know if he put it in just because it sounded good or because as a Japanese instrument it has a correlation to the title of the song, however that was one detail I wanted to share. Then follows the outro, a whistle Namjoon recorded himself. He said, "I recorded a whistle with a mic, I know it's flat but I like it better." I like it better that way too, because it really drives home the whole playlist's theme of imperfection and vulnerability. Over the sound of the whistle notes, there are also sounds of a distant siren and cars driving, as well as wind blowing. It evokes a very lonesome image. To hear this lonely whistle in the almost silence with no support provokes the feeling of solitude and desolation, and again feels very vulnerable. This whole song encapsulates the feeling of loneliness to me, and it's very fitting that Tokyo opens the playlist titled Mono, which can mean just that. The second song on the album is titled After Another City, but this time it's less ambiguous in what it could mean. Seoul is, in Namjoon's words, a tribute to Seoul, the city he has lived in since 2010 when he signed a contract under Big Hit Entertainment. In this track he explains how he hates part of Seoul, yet still feels a deep attachment to it. Here's torn between love and hate which coexist inside him. This song is a collaboration with Hon, a British hip-hop duo who provided the beat. Namjoon long thought about what to do with it and then decided to use it for a song about Seoul, which is what he had wanted to do for a long time. In the end, it took almost 2 years until the song was finalized because Namjoon re-recorded the song multiple times and made readjustments with the beat. The intro was supposed to feel chill yet lonely, which is exactly the vibe that I got from the song. Like Tokyo, we hear scenery noise, namely cars and chairs, and once again the production of the song creates a really atmospheric setting and mirrors the cold and harsh nature of South Korea's capital. This time the music is relaxed but more upbeat than Tokyo. Namjoon again uses a mixture of rapping, singing and talking, and overall a very soft and breathy voice. The first verse already paints a very distinct image. The cold air of the dawn, the city's harmony, full of buildings and cars. It is both romantic and ugly, already playing off the fine line between loving the city and hating it, which is Namjoon's whole point in the song. He also writes about how the days of his youth seem far away and that Seoul is now his home, which must be pretty different from his hometown Ilsan. In the verses, Namjoon used a lot of rhymes, which makes the lyrics sound very coherent. In the second verse, Namjoon dives deeper into his inner emotional experience, and his hate towards the city takes a more prevalent place. The romantic descriptions of the first verse are replaced by the same old or monotonous ashy face, which could reference the same types of buildings and cars that are everywhere to be seen in Seoul, as well as the smog and bad air quality. Namjoon speaks directly to the city and therefore personifies Seoul as something that lives and listens to him, but is simultaneously something that doesn't care for individuals but rather swallows them. He contemplates why Seoul sounds like Seoul when the city doesn't seem to have one, and he wonders why he sticks by the side of the city, even though he really hates it right now. He is scared what kind of person he has become while living in Seoul, and that the city has changed him from who he was in his hometown. There is no part anymore that is romantic or beautiful the way it was in the first lines. Now he just hates the city. One could even argue that he contradicts himself in the way he speaks about Seoul, but that is exactly what Namjoon is trying to say with this song, the inner conflict of hating and loving Seoul, having contradictory feelings inside him. For the next line, I found different translations. One was, I don't even have anything to reminisce about you, and another one, when you don't have any nostalgia about me. The problem is, as far as I understood, that in Korean the pronouns often miss, so you can't be sure who's talking about who. Therefore, this line could mean both that the city doesn't have anything to reminisce about Namjoon and vice versa, but I believe it makes more sense that Namjoon feels like Seoul doesn't care for him, because he stated that Seoul is a soulless place, yet he still feels attached to it, and he furthermore discusses during the whole song the memories he made in Seoul, so it wouldn't make sense that he doesn't have anything to reminisce about it. Now follows the chorus, which only consists of 2 sentences. If love and hate are the same words, I love you Seoul, and if love and hate are the same words, I hate you Seoul. It shows Namjoon's indifference towards the city, which was already apparent in the first verse and resembles his thought in Tokyo. In the third verse, Namjoon again paints detailed images of Seoul, or aspects of it. He describes buses and ever-changing landscapes which show the busyness of the city and no opportunity to calm down and be at peace. He talks about a scent of life that could be disgusting or not. Again, there is the closeness of disgust or hate in affection. And about cold parks that pretend to be warm, so parks that are promising a false sense of comfort. Once again, there is this pair of opposites next to each other, and there are even more opposites sprinkled in during the song. The buildings that look similar or slightly different fits into that theme too, of seemingly opposite traits that work together. So do the changing landscapes versus the I'm sitting still. The people who always have to wander could refer to the line above that, the cold parks pretending to be warm, because the people who seek warmth need to keep on walking. The next line is pretty interesting. The Han River which bears too much Han. The Han River, or Hangang, is the river which runs through Seoul, and Han is a concept specific to Korean culture and history, which can't be directly translated to English. Some may say it's comparable to sorrow, spite, pity, regret, or grief, but Han is far more complex and needs more explanation than that. John Hewer in the Korean Times writes, Han is an anthropological concept that operates on so many levels of Korea, from the highest historical national level to the innermost psychic feelings of the person. In short, it is the sense of having been wronged by a superior agent. Virtually all of Koreans have a deep-seated sense of grief and grievance that they have been wronged by some very powerful agents of injustice. John M. Gliona from the LA Times writes, "For the nearly 50 million South Koreans, Han is as amorphous a notion as love or hate, intensely personal yet carried around collectively, a national torch, a badge of suffering tempered by a sense of resiliency." He then quotes the interviewee Kim Ji-yoon, "As a Korean, it's embedded in your DNA. It goes far beyond everyday emotions like happiness or anger. It's a blockage, something that's tangled up and cannot be untied." Namjoon has mentioned Han before in his songs, namely Voices, which is from his first mixtape RM, where he expresses his desire to be free from it. "Rather than living an entire life while sighing breaths full of Han, I chose to live a life of stripping away my Han and breathing easily." But let's go back to Seoul and this line. The name of the river doesn't stem from the concept of Han, but another meaning of the word which can also mean big. However, when Namjoon says the Hangang bears too much Han, it could be understood as holding too much sorrow and deep-seated grief. With that, Namjoon might be referring to the fact that a lot of people take their own lives in the river. Suicide and mental health are a big issue in Korean society, with South Korea having the 10th highest suicide rate in the world. The Mapo Bridge over the Han River is also known as Suicide Bridge because of so many people committing suicide in the river. Another slightly less depressing interpretation of this line is from the YouTube channel Minidance. They said that Han is also often used to describe regret over missed opportunities and can therefore be understood as Namjoon saying that there is too much sorrow and regret that has accumulated in the river or in Seoul. This feeling that it is too late to make something out of your life also fits with the following lines. "The swings that can't look up at the sky on their own" could also be translated to "those people who can't look up at the sky on their own," because "kenedul" can mean both swings or, in an older meaning, "those people." Swings can't move by themselves, they need someone to do it for them in order to fly. The same could be said about those who live in Seoul, the people who have no choice but to stay there. Again, I am drawing my information from the YouTuber Minidance. They said that a lot of people have the urge to move out of Seoul, but because most jobs are found in the Seoul area, many can't. But life in Seoul is harsh due to the difficult economic state. Housing is extremely expensive and finding jobs can be difficult as well. I have heard that as a result of the lack of financial stability, a lot of young Koreans actually don't marry or plan for a family because they wouldn't be able to support their family anyway. So, coming back to the lyrics, and the kids all grown up but me who's a little late. Quick side note, the kids actually sound very similar to the swings in the line before. This line now could be put in connection with Namjoon's personal life and how he has repeatedly said that he doesn't feel like an adequate adult because he lacks too many life skills, like being able to drive or cook, but that would be total speculation and I don't want to imply that this is what he wanted to say when it absolutely could be something else. Anyways, the desire to move out of Seoul or to move up in life is referenced in the next line as well. But Minidance said in the video that while a lot of Koreans dream about leaving Seoul or Korea in general, for many it is impossible. One, due to the lack of jobs in other areas of South Korea, as I mentioned before, but going abroad is actually very challenging too because a lot of Koreans don't speak second languages. But before I go further, please read for yourself first. Interestingly, in the fourth verse, Namjoon admits that, in spite of everything he despises about Seoul, he loves the city. In comparison to his friends who say they will move away, he has to admit that he even loves the ugly sides of Seoul, the fumes and nastiness, the fishy smell of Cheonggyecheon, and the lonesomeness of Songyudo. Cheonggyecheon was a stream that was refurbished in a massive urban renewal project and is now a tourist attraction, and Songyudo is an island in the Han River with a nice park. Again, referring to what Minidance said, apparently Songyudo is a popular space for couples to go on dates to, so it is ironic that Namjoon refers to it as lonesome. Or exactly that is the reason why it can feel lonesome. Anyway, it's remarkable how with a few words Namjoon paints a clear image in the listener's brain of the places he is describing and of life in Seoul in general. Even though he admits to loving part of the city, it is very apparent that Seoul is not where Namjoon is truly feeling at home. In the BTS song Ma City, Namjoon says the following about his hometown Ilsan. "I won't say it even if I were to die. To say I'll live somewhere else, even for $1 billion? No thanks. Ilsan, the place I want to be buried when I die. The place that seems most harmonious, nature and city, building and flowers. I like Lake Park more than the Han River. It's small, but it will hug you more warmly. When I feel like I'm losing myself, I find my faded self in that place. Remember your scent and everything. You're my summer, autumn, winter, and every spring. Here as well, he's referring to Seoul as being cold and not embracing him the way Ilsan does, which reminds me of the line earlier of cold parks pretending to be warm. But back to Seoul, after another chorus comes a bridge and then again a chorus in which Namjoon sounds more contemplative and reflective than before. The bridge consists of 2 sentences only. I'm leaving you, I'm living you. With these 2 sentences, Namjoon again depicts his inner conflict. The play on words, this homophone of leaving and living, encapsulates his indifference and the love-hate relationship he has with the city. I have learned that there's actually a word for this concept in Korean, which is yangka kamjong. It could be translated to ambivalence or dichotomy of emotions, and here it's the 2-sided emotions Namjoon feels towards Seoul. This concept is the same that we will see a lot in RM's work. He uses a similar sentiment in Tokyo when he's talking about life and death and love and hate, and we will see it again in Everything Goes. He said in an interview, "When you're in love, you think about farewell at the same time. When you feel successful, you think about the downfall. This ambivalence is not something we can easily overcome. So one must carry the inherent solitude and darkness. You need a shelter in order to be friends with this anxiety." We have seen the inherent coexistence of good and bad things a lot in Namjoon's lyrics. This realization both makes life easier to understand as well as being disheartening, because everything in life is complex. Nothing is just good or just bad, and we have to carry the burden of this ambivalence. I have heard Namjoon talk about what he does in order to stay sane and to fight off the anxiety and darkness that possibly come with this realization multiple times, the last one being the live stream for his 27th birthday. For as long as I have been a fan of BTS and Namjoon, I have admired his ability to take in the beautiful moments in life, no matter how small they might be. I admire him for enjoying to water his plants, ride his bike by the side of the river, or go to art galleries. Maybe these things are the shelter he talked about in the interview. So in the song Soul, he talks about the draining emotions he feels while living in the city, but during the last years he also gave his fans an inspiration of how to make life in the city more livable or enjoyable. And that doesn't just go for living in Seoul, but anywhere. Just like the BTS song On says, "Gotta go insane to stay sane, throw myself whole into both worlds." I will spare you the references these 2 lines possibly make to the Wings era, or more specifically to the song Blood, Sweat and Tears, and the works of Hermann Hesse and Friedrich Nietzsche that served as an inspiration. But regardless of these connections, what their lines say, I think, is we need something to be crazy about and to throw ourselves into in order to not lose our minds. The lyric video for Soul does a really good job recreating Namjoon's indifference, or yangka kamjong. With the beginning of the bridge, the screen is separated into 2 mirrored parts, which also show Namjoon's own dichotomy. Or maybe it could symbolize how Namjoon himself and the city are 2 sides of the same coin, referencing the line, "I have already become a part of you." But besides that, it portrays the city well with the images that are shown. We see the Han River, the Cheonggyecheon River, and the Sonyeodo Island, which are all referenced in the song, as well as other important landmarks in Seoul such as the Lotte World Tower and Namsan Tower, or Yeouido, an island on which the Congress building stands. There is also a short interruption of the video in which we see Namjoon sit in a car in a parking lot near the river, receiving a phone call.
여보세요? 한강인데 가려고.
This scene also shows the search for a quiet place in the city to find shelter, maybe the kind of shelter I just talked about when fighting to stay sane. Minidan said this is actually a common thing in Seoul to hang out at the river when contemplating about life. This song is dedicated to all the moon children out there, as Namjoon said himself, for those who feel like they can only show their true self at night. But let's have Namjoon explain what moonchild is about.
밤이 더 좋은 사람들, 밤일 때, 뭐 어떻게 보면 넷이랑 비슷한 연관이 되는 건데, 낮에 숨 막히게 스스로 직업이든 뭐든 그런 일상을 살아내다가 밤에 여러 가지 시선이나 그런 많은 것들에서 벗어났을 때 해방감을 느끼는 사람들 되게 많을 거라고 생각하거든요. 특히 현대인들 중에는. 저 같은 사람. 저는 요즘에 그 정도로까지 밤에 무게를 두고 있진 않아요. 나도 너무 좋은데 밤이 너무나 저를 해방시켜준다고 생각했을 때 이 노래를 만들었어요.
There's already a lot that can be said about the title of this track alone. First of all, Namjoon stated that he just liked this word, but that doesn't mean there aren't any more layers to it. The most obvious meaning of moonchild is the correlation to the night. People who stay up late, feeling liberated by the night, as Namjoon said himself, the night, the time when the moon shines. But if you think about the moon, there is another meaning. The moon only being illuminated by sunlight at one side, consequentially has a dark side too, or maybe a more hidden one, the one which is turned away from the earth. The moon children who dread the day have this dark or hidden side too, that comes out during the night. Namjoon said he started this song with a simple noise he found on the synthesizer, which I found pretty interesting. At first he had a singer in mind who should sing the song, but the collaboration didn't work out, so in the end he had to sing it himself. The autotune on this track is pretty apparent, which could be both a stylistic choice, because it definitely fits the song, or be due to the fact that Namjoon is primarily a rapper and singing is not his strength, or it could be a bit of both. The autotune actually adds to the futuristic vibe of the song. We hear string instruments which are clearly produced on a computer and therefore make the song feel electronic or spacey, which obviously fits the theme of Moon very well. And I'm not sure why, but I always see blinking neon lights when I listen to Moonchild. At times, especially in the bridge, the song gets more quiet with a lot of echoes and without a beat. During the most part of the song, however, there's this full sound of many different layers. We have beats, different instruments, echoes, ad-libs, and multiple recordings of Namjoon's voice, which are layered atop of each other. All of this gives a very dense or thick impression. While Seoul sounded cold and harsh, Moonchild sounds warm and cozy. We traveled from an unkind and rather inhumane major city into a small room by night. The first part of the first verse explains who the moon children are. People who are part of the moonlight who can't breathe in the sunlight, aka the normal day-to-day life. Therefore, they have to hide. Suffering is part of their identity, and even more, they are born to be sad, having to suffer to be glad. Namjoon gives the moon children a fantastical element, making them creatures of the night, and there is an undeniable edginess to the song. Although this song came out before Mono, Namjoon said he first came up with this term for moonchild, having worked on it before 4 o'clock. Here Namjoon writes, "The sun suffocates me and the world strips me naked. I can't help it, there's no other way. I collect myself that's shattered beneath the moonlight. I call you moonchild, we are children of the moon. I breathe the cold night air." In 4 o'clock as well, he expresses the feeling of not being able to be free during the day, for the sun suffocates him. And again, he is using the term moonchild or children of the moon to give the people who feel like not being able to breathe during the day a fantastical element, and thus turns the negative feelings into something to be proud of and to find comfort in. But still, suffering is an inherent part of their nature. Going back to the song Moonchild, why do the moon children need to suffer in order to be glad? Maybe because they like the pain that is familiar to them, and without it they wouldn't feel like themselves. Or, on a more positive note, they need the suffering as a contrast to the good times, because if everything was happy, well, nothing would be. The moon children's relationship with pain is explained further in the next part. I love the rhyme rain pain plane, and the speaker says, even though the plane will crash down, we have to dance, even dance when in pain. The plane could be a metaphor for life, at some point we will die just like the plane crashes, or it could be an allegory for a good ride, so to speak, a good thing that will eventually come to an end. I immediately thought about Namjoon's time in BTS, which will also end at some point, even though right now they are flying high. This concept of finiteness appears again in the 6th song on the tracklist, Everything Goes. There Namjoon says, both pain and people will die eventually, emphasizing that we need to focus on and treasure the now, but again I will go into more detail later. Now the speaker says he is the only one who can console himself, which will be contradicted in a following line where he states that the moonchildren comfort each other. But it also resembles a line in uhgood where he says, all I need is me, I know, which even in uhgood doesn't sound like he believes it himself. He then tells us that it's okay to cry, to shed the tears, but that it isn't to tear yourself, playing off the multiple meanings of tear and tear. This wordplay is also used in BTS's song Outro Tear, which is about a breakup, not necessarily in the romantic sense, and the tear play on words is used to describe the tearing apart and the tears that flow during this breakup. So coming back to Moonchild, while we are allowed to feel sad and cry, no one should endorse in self-deprecating mindsets. This line could be even seen as an antithesis to the suffer to be glad line earlier. Indulging in the suffering, tearing yourself as in hating on yourself is not productive or healthy. Also, Namjoon could be using another wordplay because it's okay sounds a lot like iksuke, which means get used to, so the line would go like this: get used to shed the tears, but don't you tear yourself. The chorus resembles an anthem for all the moonchildren out there who Namjoon assembles by this song, giving them comfort by showing them they are not alone and even lifting them up, telling them they shine. There is a nice set of rhymes, which makes the chorus sound very coherent. I think the first 3 lines of this verse can actually be read as both written from a first person or second person perspective. At least for the first line, I have found a translation that said, though I leave, I cannot actually get to leave once, so the speaker might talk about himself as well as talk to the moonchildren. But in the end, it isn't really a big difference because the speaker sees himself as one of the moonchildren anyway. What he says is that either him or the moonchildren talk about leaving, wanting to die, and letting everything go. However, they do exactly the opposite. It again reminds me of another song on the album, Forever Rain, where Namjoon talks about being chained to something that holds him in this life and he can't let go. But we will get to that later. Then a very interesting line follows. Thinking of not thinking is still thinking, you know? I'm sure everyone knows the phenomenon when you're trying to not think of something, you automatically think of it even more, and trying to constrain your thoughts in general is just as unsuccessful. The speaker then says it is the destiny of him and the moonchildren to smile in endless pain, again playing off the relationship of suffering and joy. And with the next line, there is no freedom when you say freedom out loud, you know? I might need a little help in understanding the Korean lyrics, because with the English translations I found, it could either mean as soon as you speak freedom out loud, there is no freedom anymore, or only saying you are free doesn't actually mean you are. I tend to the latter, because it would fit the lines before of talking about doing this or that, but being unable to actually do that. Just because you say you have freedom doesn't mean you do, just as saying you will let go of the weight doesn't mean you will. But anyone who knows Korean, please let me know in the comments how you interpret this line. First of all, the imagery of the blinking lights, the night sky, and the thorns is absolutely beautiful. I can vividly imagine a street by night. But beautiful imagery isn't everything that is great about this verse. Now the speaker gives instructions. When the moon shines, the moonchildren should look up at the night sky and the blinking streetlight. He wants the moonchildren to see that the streetlight has thorns too, as well as them. The thorns could be a paraphrase or euphemism for anti-bird spikes, and the fact that the light has thorns but still shines gives hope to those who feel like they are not worthy of being looked at. The speaker explicitly says, someone will be consoled by your thorns for sure, reassuring the moonchildren that they will comfort each other. Thorns comfort us because they remind us that we aren't the only ones who suffer or are imperfect. This concept is also prevalent in the bridge, how we look at each other and comfort each other. Let's talk about the lyric video really quick. It is again directed by Chwa Young-sok, and unsurprisingly, I like it a lot. The room that is prevalent throughout the entire video, this image of sitting alone during the night, listening to music, and the neon lights fit well with the sounds of the song. It's pretty simple, but so effective and fitting. Badbye, the 4th song on the album, functions as a bridge between the first 3 and the last 3 songs. Namjoon mentioned this himself, and I will explain at the end of the video how I think this whole playlist is structured. Badbye is rather short, which makes it perfect in Namjoon's eyes, and I think it works well within the album. However, I would have loved a longer version. It's about a farewell, a goodbye, which isn't good. The title is a neologism consisting of the words bad and goodbye. Namjoon first worked on Badbye alone, but because the style reminded him of Eon, a Korean singer, he asked him to collaborate on the song. They collaborated again in 2021 for Don't, a track on Eon's album Fragile. Both songs correlate with each other, and Don't could be seen as a prequel to Badbye, capturing the moment of a breakup or right before, where someone begs for their partner to not give up on the relationship, and Badbye taking place after the breakup, classifying the goodbye as a badbye. A bit like Tokyo, this song is very ambiguous. We can't be sure who or what the speaker is saying goodbye to. There is a you that is addressed, and from the wording you and I, bad try, it's plausible that this song is about a romantic partner. However, it is not to be excluded that badbye could also be about a dying platonic friendship or a business relationship. The speaker is asking the other person to not say goodbye. At first one could think he's asking them to stay, but in the next line he says, "'cause it's a lie." So the reason they shouldn't use this word is that it isn't truthful, because the breakup is not good. In the next part of the song, the speaker asks the other person to kill him softly and scatter him as fragments, which is super haunting. One could argue that the speaker would rather die than have the other person walk away, and that the breakup is killing him. He's begging to not get destroyed gruesomely. In the last part of the song, what stands out to me the most are the numerous rhymes. The repetition of I, try, cry, and why sounds almost like an echo. That might be a stretch, but what makes these words echo could be the emptiness which the other person left behind, or the memories of the relationship echo and resonate. You know why? We don't, and we don't really have a clue what the thing that led to the breakup could be. I quickly want to touch on the music production and sound design of this song, because I again absolutely love the beginning where the static noise builds up and eventually leads into the melody. The noise reminds me of a radio when you try to get a signal. That may be a stretch, but in the context of the song, this could resemble the act of trying to get the signal from that person who's going away, like desperately wanting them to stay, wanting to connect or communicate with them. The sound in general reflects the mystery and ambiguous vibe of the lyrics. Whatever meaning it has, it makes you listen and demands your attention, and it already creates a distinct atmosphere. The ticking noise which builds up to the first lyrics reminds me of a bomb which is about to explode, like the inevitable breakup that is about to happen. The melody is pretty simple, and there is a motif that runs through the whole song, but is repeatedly altered very slightly. Once again, we have many different layers. The song builds on while still staying relatively quiet and haunting. The voices of both Eon and Namjoon are breathy and a little feeble, which complements the theme of the song. The production of their voices makes it sound like they are distant, as if there are filters or a barrier between you, the listener, and them, the speaker, which could again be linked to the meaning of the song. Uhgood is one of the most introspective songs on the album, in which Namjoon writes about his feelings of loneliness and of not belonging. The title has a double meaning. It functions as the romanization of the Korean term uhgood, which has a lot of possible translations like being out of place, feeling alienated, passing or missing oneself, falling short, or not being enough. These terms alone describe the song's theme pretty well, but then the English expression uhgood can also be seen as the answer someone gives when asked how they are, with being an expression used to think about an answer. I think everyone knows the situation of being asked how you are, but knowing that the other person isn't really expecting an honest answer, so you just say, good. It's essentially this meme.
And they ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
On a more serious note, just like all the uhgoods in the world that hide a complex reality and emotional state behind themselves, this song, which describes deep inner turmoil, also hides behind the simple expression of uhgood. Here Namjoon talks about not being who he wants to be, and he again uses two different sides of himself to describe how he's feeling. Because of that, another meaning of uhgood, missing each other due to taking different paths, also makes sense. He doesn't miss another person, but himself. At first it was planned to use this song as Namjoon's solo on the Wings album, however eventually Reflection was chosen for Wings. Uhgood deals with similar themes like Reflection though, debating the real me inside oneself and different personas one has. Just like Persona, Namjoon's solo song of the 2019 album Map of the Soul Persona, or Awakening or Voices from his first mixtape, or some of BTS's songs like Idol or Fake Love, or this line in Airplane Part 2. The question of identity and the real self has obviously been a prevalent issue in Namjoon's artistic expression. It doesn't sound like he believes what he says, it's the saying everyone has heard. Actually, Namjoon already wrote the answer to this dilemma of feeling alone, of feeling like you have to figure things out on your own, in Moonchild. There he said that we are each other's comfort by sharing imperfections. However, here he repeats this sort of mantra, seemingly in an effort to make himself believe it. In the second verse, Namjoon uses a lot of quotes his own mind shouts at him. He is disappointed with himself and therefore he tramples himself. The things he blames himself for or accuses himself of are not feeling enough, the need to be better and cooler, and the big pressure of always having to win. He even says, if you're going to be defeated, might as well die. This sounds like a really bad and drastic conclusion. However, I have heard that this might as well die is a common figure of speech in Korea and therefore might not sound as drastic to native speakers as it does to non-Koreans. Nevertheless, the sentence builds the pressure Namjoon is feeling at this point. The internalized pressure is also shown and built up in the song through the repetitions of the word you in the last lines, as well as through the rhymes that add on and on. The accusations become more aggressive over the course of the verse, and while I think these words are his own that trample himself, it could also be that these are the sentences haters have said to him, things that he has read on the internet and thus internalized them. Or they could just be the external pressure and demands he is feeling in general. This is even more plausible due to the fact that he says these lines twice each, like an echo. One time could be other people, one could be him, repeating and believing these statements. The chorus explains Namjoon's hurting in more detail. He feels like he's out of place, which is the name of the song and the underlying theme of it as well, which hurts him. A pain you have to experience in order to understand. Where he is right now doesn't feel right and he wants to cross the two bridges to find his real me, which could even be a callback to his name change. But the distance between his ideal me and his reality is so far away. The fact that nege to me sounds almost identical to nege to you underlines the two me's that Namjoon is referring to, the one real him and the ideal version of himself. So the you in reach you could be the ideal version he's trying to be. After the chorus, the intro is repeated. He still doesn't sound like he believes what he says, and then he asks, why do I feel lonely? I feel so lonely when I'm with me, which is an absolutely heartbreaking statement. And it's the confession that, no, he doesn't only need himself, because when he is alone, he feels lonely. The third verse is split into two parts. The first 4 lines present a helpful mindset that imperfections are okay. That seems like a learning progression from the previous verse. But the last 4 lines contradict these statements, and the speaker admits that he can't let this perfect idea of himself go. But let's take a closer look at the first few lines. Here Namjoon uses the word of B, the English letter, and P, which means rain in Korean, which both rhyme in the first 4 lines. He says that receiving a B, as in the grade, is okay. The line, it might rain for days, sounds like he's referring to forces in life that can't be controlled. And the next line, even in the desert, the rain can fall, sounds like he is turning the rain into something positive. However, all this talk about imperfections and things you can't control is nullified when the speaker apologizes and says, even though I just said to not be so hard on yourself, I can't live by that. I can't let the ideal me go. It's interesting that, again, he's referring to another version of himself as you. Here it's the idea of him inside his head, and instead of accepting that perfection is unattainable, he needs to keep striving for that perfect self. And the chorus is repeated once more. He still struggles with not being enough, with feeling out of place, and with wanting to reach the perfect version of himself, just like at the beginning of the song. Once again, the music has an interesting relationship with the lyrics, and once again I apologize for not knowing the proper vocabulary to describe the music production, but I will try regardless. The synthesized sounds have this wafting or billowing effect. It sounds soft, blurred, and flowing. There are again a lot of echoes in different voices which are layered or doing ad-libs in the background. The production creates the feeling of being lost in space or being adrift, like losing yourself in your own thoughts. It ends on the same chords it started with, not really giving a satisfying musical conclusion. Just like the song doesn't provide a solution, it just states these thoughts and questions without answering them. A quick note on the use of wordplay in mono. We have seen a lot of it already, however, that is really subtle and minimal compared to the kind of wordplay Namjoon uses in songs like Trivia Love or Dang. I highly recommend looking into these songs because it's so much fun how Namjoon plays with the language there. However, for mono, this playful approach would have been very misplaced. The wordplay here, like the BB, is more focused on creating distinct images or to sound coherent and beautiful through rhymes and alliterations. Whereas in Trivia Love, it almost gets cheesy at times, or the wordplay in Deng, which is full of cultural references and sounds extremely sassy in its delivery. Imagine driving on a highway. The sky is a dark gray, it rains, and strong gusts of wind yank at your car. But in the far distance, there is a snippet of clear sky and the sun peeks through the heavy blanket of clouds. And you know you will soon leave the storm behind. That's what Everything Goes feels like. This is a song in which Namjoon quite literally tells you that everything will eventually pass. It's arguably the most soothing, comforting, and meditative song of all the 7 tracks, and just perfect for when you feel exhausted or overwhelmed. And I know it means a lot to many people. Namjoon wrote the song in 3 days when he had to return home early from a show they were shooting in Europe. In his live stream, he said his mentor or counselor told him the way to reduce psychological pain is to think that eventually it will pass. I think the beauty of this thought is that in order to have the strength to withstand the trials in your life, you have to see the end of the tunnel. To think or to feel as though the pain will exist forever robs you of the strength to keep going and to stand up straight. This mantra, which has helped him personally and which he repeated again and again, he now shared with the world and helped potentially millions of people with it. Bang PD originally wanted to put the song on a BTS album as a hidden track, but Namjoon refused because the song was too important to him and he wanted to keep it for later. Everything Goes is a collaboration with the South Korean alternative rock band Nell, who played the guitar and drums that can be heard during the song. And Namjoon wrote emails back and forth with Kim Jong-won, the lead vocalist of the group, where they discussed the mixing and production of the song. Nell and Eon as well are Namjoon's childhood heroes, and according to him, they taught him that sad music can heal one's sorrow. It's just beautiful to think that now he collaborated with them and made healing songs himself. Let's actually look at the music and production first before we dive into the lyrics, because I think the music does just as much, if not more, for consoling the listener and wrapping you up in comforting and reassuring feelings. I love the melody, the quick progression of notes that is repeated again and again, and how the song slowly introduces new elements as it plays on. There are the drums, Namjoon's lyrics, the guitar, and different melodies. The song takes a lot of time to build up, and it isn't hectic at all. The chords we hear persist for a relatively long time before we move on to the next one. In the verses, the drums vanish and the focus is on Namjoon's voice, which is getting stronger during the verses. It's like the repetition of the Everything Goes is giving him strength to speak up, if that makes sense. I love how the track progresses, how it swells, especially at the Every Day I Pray part, with the echo where all the elements that got introduced earlier are recurring. At the end, the song slowly fades out, sound of rain appears, and at last, all we hear is rain. In the outro, we hear Namjoon humming, which creates the illusion of him singing us a lullaby or rocking us to sleep. It's just an extra treat of comfort at the end. As I already said, the phrases Everything Goes and Chinaga are repeated a lot, but instead of being a lazy choice to fill up time, this actually drives home the point of the whole song, being calming. Regarding the lyrics, I gotta say, finding translations that didn't contradict each other was the hardest for this song. If you can speak Korean, please let me know if the way I use translations is accurate or if there would have been a better phrasing. Before I delve into the meaning of the verse, I want to point out how absolutely beautiful this phrasing is. Even the English translation sounds like a poem, and that reminded me of the fact that Namjoon liked to write poetry in school, and that he once said to Jimin when he helped him write the song Promised during a tour, that Jimin should read the song aloud, just like a poem, in order to find any weaknesses in the lyrics. This explains pretty well how Namjoon approaches songwriting. Working on this video, I was baffled how every single line held so much meaning, and just sounded beautiful both phonetically and in the way it created images in my mind. But diving into the actual lyrics, in the first verse, Namjoon talks about the inevitableness of pain. In life, there are different stages, phases of darkness and light. We have to feel pain in life just as flowers and berries do too. Namjoon uses the images of plants that resemble that circle of life just as much as the night and day or spring and summer circle. Life means change, change between good times and bad times. So pain is inevitable. Instead of arguing with that or being angry at this fact, Namjoon says he takes a deep breath to embrace the world, to feel it as vividly as he can. I think by that, Namjoon might mean that the prickling air in his lungs reminds him that he's alive. It might hurt a little bit, but because it hurts, it's proof that he's living. I love how he makes it sound that life itself and the fact that we're alive and breathing is a miracle in itself. But in the next line, he admits that he wanted to run away multiple times when he was in these dark periods of time that we just talked about, when he couldn't enjoy or appreciate the stinging breath of life. I guess while enduring painful times, no one would be thankful for them. It is only after that you can appreciate the good, now that you know how bad it can be as well. The good times suddenly seem so much better and you're able to truly take them in, fully aware that they are not granted. So we truly need to suffer in order to be glad. Namjoon says something similar in the song Life. From the moment that everything is born, life is more beautiful, knowing that we've taken a loan on death. Even light is treasured more when there's darkness. The sunshine appears after we've passed through the storm. Life is more treasurable due to the fact that it is finite, and the good times become more appreciated in contrast with the darkness. What I see in this concept of life meaning to endure both bad and good times is the same as we talked about earlier in Seoul, the 양가감정. This ambivalence and two-sided emotion that can be applied to everything in life. In BTS's hidden track C on the Love Yourself Her album, Namjoon wrote, "Where there's hope, there is always hardship, and where there's hope, there is always despair." Again, playing off the 양가감정 of life. The speaker prays that he can become a better adult, admitting now that he doesn't feel as though he's enough. And still, he stays, he endures, which stands in connection to him admitting that he wanted to run away before. He now says the reason he stays is the knowledge that 1. The pain will die someday, and 2. So will we. Life is short, it is limited, the beautiful times as well as the painful ones. So if you die anyway eventually, you might as well feel and live and breathe in the time that you are here. Matta means to hit or to welcome, so the line could be translated to become dull or numb to the pain, you have to welcome the winds. The wind could stand for the trials of life. We cannot flee from trials and difficult times, the only option is to throw ourselves into the wind, and by doing that we will get stronger, bracing ourselves for everything that is to come. We cannot live in a dream world forever. At some point we will experience life in its cruel forms. We have to accept that change and pain is both part of life. These lines remind me of Magic Shop, where Jungkook says, "I'm not going to say anything blatant like find strength, because those words do not really help anyone." One quote of Namjoon's livestream that I absolutely loved is,
막 뭐 논리적인, 뭐 이성적인 여러 가지 방법을 같이 찾아주는 것보다 같이 안아주고 그냥 야 고생했다, 수고했다 이런 게 훨씬 더 위로가 될 때가 있는 것처럼.
I find this to be true, and in a way, this song is the hug that he was talking about. For the last line, param can mean both wind or wishes, so the sentence can be interpreted in multiple ways. But my knowledge of the Korean language is far too lacking for me to interpret it correctly. Over the course of the verses, Namjoon's voice swells more and more, and he sounds certain about what he's saying and determined to make us understand these words as well. Then another chorus follows, and eventually the Chinaga and Everything Goes lines fade out and we hear
go
As I already said, the end of this song resembles a sweet lullaby. The rain sets in and we are slowly rocked to sleep, or into a calm state of mind at least. The lyrics state that the rain comes and we hear raindrops as well. Let's talk about the fact that the next song, Forever Rain, starts with the sound of rain again. This smooth transition of the songs is seamless and definitely intended. Namjoon said in his livestream that he likes to listen to an album from start to finish, even though few people might do that. He compared the consumption of songs the way people do it today to eating instant rice, but he wanted to create an album that functions as a whole and is consumed as such. That way, the listener can comprehend what the artist must have intended, the progression of the songs is visible, and the themes are more apparent, which gives you, in Namjoon's words, a greater catharsis. I absolutely agree. This is actually very true for mono, because I cannot listen to this album on shuffle. I need to listen to it in the chronological order and listen to all 7 songs ideally. So not just for mono, but in general, I encourage you to listen to more albums all the way through and appreciate the artist for putting together a coherent progression of songs.
Forever rain. Forever rain. Forever rain.
We have arrived at the last song of the album, which is, in my opinion, the saddest one, and it feels the most vulnerable and personal. Forever Rain is about how Namjoon wishes it would rain all day, so that no one would look at him and he could indulge in his sadness. For Namjoon, this is the title song. He first thought about whether to put this song on the Wings album, but again, after talking to Bang PD, who thought the song deserves more, it ended up where it is now. He said in his livestream that he always wanted to write a song about rain, and he stated that there is no song that is more like me than this, and that he wants this song to be played at his funeral. At first, he wanted to produce the song on his own, but then he collaborated with His Noise and Adora, 2 of Big Hit's producers. The song starts, as I said, with the sound of rain and with a quite simple melody which is played on a piano, and once again it takes its time to build up. Namjoon only starts to rap after 38 seconds. This time is used to create the melancholic atmosphere of a rainy day and to reflect the emotional state the speaker is in, and it also gives the illusion that everything is slowing down because of the rain, which is exactly what Namjoon wishes for. With the beginning of the first verse, the piano melody from the intro vanishes and the focus is on Namjoon's voice. In the first verse, Namjoon admits he wants the rain to pour all day, for then no one would look at him because he is hiding under an umbrella, as well as everyone else, and everyone would mind their own business. And his first confession is even sadder. He wants the rain to cry for him, presumably because he doesn't have the luxury to cry for himself. I will explain in a bit what I mean by that. Perhaps there's also the connection of the rain hiding the origin of your tears on your face, so he would feel more free to show his emotions. He then also expresses his desire to slow down, as his rap and his life are usually too fast. This theme of slowing down is also apparent in the production of the song. At the beginning there is a ticking noise, which reminds me of a metronome. In the context of this song, it could stand for the fast pace of Namjoon's life and the pressure he's under to always perform his best, which is exactly what he wants to escape from. It also reminds me of Seoul, where he criticized the fast pace of the city too. The desire to slow down is apparent in both. With these lines, I see a person standing over a puddle, head down, looking at their own shadow in the water, which also reflects the sky. Or another meaning might just be that the sky mirrors the speaker's dark emotions, aka his shadow, because it's also a dark gray while it rains. In the pre-chorus, Namjoon tells us what he wants. Slow rap, in contrast to the usually too fast rap he's done his whole life. Slow jam, slow rain, everything slow. Here I'd like to point out that regarding the theme of rain, different synthesized sounds in the background resemble raindrops falling down. It's apparent throughout the whole playlist really, how the music accompanies and underlines the theme of the lyrics, and I'm sure if I listened to mono just a few more times, I'd find even more Easter eggs. Then the chorus follows, which doesn't include the ticking noise from earlier, nor a beat. It's free from the fast pace of Namjoon's day-to-day life and a reflection of his beautiful fantasy that he wants to escape in, a world in which it rains forever. In the verses, his voice sounds melancholic, dull, and miserable, just like the reality he's talking about. During the chorus, however, his voice allows us to hear the longing and his fantasy-like desire in his heart. The verses build up this uncomfortable feeling, the unwellness that is also provoked by the wafting sound and the music production. The chorus washes that feeling away and holds a more hopeful tone. This verse is depicting a state of loneliness and captivity. The rain feeling like a friend, and only friend, to him who knocks at his window and asks if he's okay is an absolutely heartbreaking imagery. And it reminds me of Namjoon's song Reflection, where it's his fear that holds his hand and is his friend. Namjoon's answer to the rain is equally heartbreaking. He says he feels like a hostage of life, painting life as a painful, exhausting existence. Perhaps he's also a hostage because he can't die. And the reason he can't die is that he doesn't live. It may sound illogical at first, but it reminds me of the mutual dependence of life and death which we have discussed in Tokyo. One can't exist without the other. But because Namjoon doesn't feel like he's alive, he also cannot die, therefore feeling like life is trapping him. In the last lines of the verse he says, "But I'm chained to something." Even though he feels like he doesn't live, he feels a pull towards life, towards something in this life. Maybe he's referring to his responsibilities as the leader and a member of BTS. Even if he wanted to disappear, he couldn't. People are depending on him to deliver his best performance, on stage as well as off stage, and in front of the many cameras that follow BTS wherever they go. This is what I meant at the beginning of the first verse. Even if he wanted to break down, to cry or to run away, he couldn't. That's what comes with standing in the spotlight. And that's why he wants the rain to cry for him and also for all the other people to look away, so that he would have the luxury of breaking down or crying. Because it truly is a luxury to give into your emotions when you feel down and to not act as if everything was okay. Also, maybe the reason he can't die and the thing he's chained to is the fact that his life and existence are set in stone, or rather recorded on endless videos, photos, or other media, and then there is his music, of course, which will live on. If humanity will exist in 100 years and we don't wipe ourselves out, people will still be able to listen to his thoughts. He's immortal in that sense. The next verse plays on this unusual situation he is in again. You and me, normal people, could just knock on somewhere, but he can't. He exclaims his desire to kiss the whole world so hard so that maybe someone would embrace his weary body. He wants to show his own vulnerability and for other people to embrace him, to take him in with open arms. But that is part of the fantasy of the forever pouring rain, the world in which he would give into his emotions. In reality, he knows he couldn't. The last verse is heartbreaking as well. He asks the rain to keep pouring forever, to not ask any questions and to just stay by his side, for then he isn't lonely. Namjoon expresses his desire to stay in that grey, rainy world forever, but he knows that isn't possible. Now Namjoon uses the English expression "when it rains it pours," meaning if something bad happens, another and even worse thing is about to happen as well. Namjoon could be turning the expression on its head, wanting it to rain even harder, to pour, for then everything would be even slower. And then we hear this utopia of forever rain once again. In the music, which swells beautifully, we hear a guitar and we get sucked into this fantasy through the melodies and Namjoon's delivery. The song ends with the Korean phrases for forever, which is repeated multiple times, as well as please come down. Although I have seen translations where people heard "you're my hero" instead of the Korean "Youngwon이" and instead of "내려줘," never change. I personally don't believe Namjoon sang English words here, but this is exactly what he wanted. That different people who speak different languages can hear different phrases and meanings. And with an echo on the words "please come down" or "pour on me," providing that is the right interpretation, if there even is one, the playlist comes to an end. At this point, I want to quickly talk about the music video, which I absolutely adore for its art style and imagery. It resembles Mono as a whole in the way it isn't flashy or pompous, but rather simple in some ways, yet full of meaning and beauty. Of course, it is only drawn in black and white, which surely is a callback to the title of the playlist, and it's also successfully reflecting the melancholic mood of Forever Rain. There are some things that have a direct connection to the lyrics, for example the pouring rain, the people who hide under their umbrellas, the standing on the darkness, or the imagery of puddles. There are even some callbacks to the lyrics from different songs on Mono, like the multiple selves we hear about in uhgood or Tokyo that can be seen here and here. The people under their umbrellas seem to float during the video, which gives the impression that time has stopped. Everyday life has come to a halt, just like the speaker in the song wishes for. And then there are new ideas and images represented, or perhaps the sentiments of the lyrics and the music are translated into a visual medium. I like how the black circle that is apparent throughout the entire video seems like the black abyss one might fall into, like depression and hopelessness, just like the speaker in the song who's standing on the edge of darkness as well. At the end, the circle swallows the whole screen. I love how the people's faces under the umbrellas are all disformed, which could show how every person has ugly sides we don't want to show to the world. And all of these people seem to be alone. It's not only the protagonist of the video that is lonely or distant from the people around him. There is a lot in the music video that I didn't touch on, and a lot that I didn't fully understand as well, if I'm honest, so please tell me your thoughts on the music video in the comments. What I can say, however, is that once again the video perfectly encapsulates the vibe and theme of the song. Mono as a whole is just simply coherent. Okay, so this is my attempt of explaining the internal structure and overarching thread of this playlist. Mono starts with Tokyo, which is the intro and sets the tone for what is to come. Seoul comes after Tokyo, being linked by the title alone. Seoul is a little bit more upbeat, but we are still in this urban space. Moonchild goes from the big cities and the lonesomeness they bring into a small space, an apartment or room by night and a blinking light at the dark street. Badbye is kind of a break, a horrible moment and, again, very ambiguous like Tokyo. It resets the tone and now we move from urban spaces and noises of cars into a more personal and internal world. Uhgood is extremely vulnerable and not linked to any experiences of the outer world, like a city for example, but instead focuses on internal struggles. Everything Goes is the promise that things will get better. Uhgood was posing a question, Everything Goes is the answer. The pain that was explained in the 5 songs before will eventually pass. But then, the last song of the album, the lasting expression, is Forever Rain. This song is the most depressing and honest, a culmination of the vulnerability that was presented in all songs before, and from a musical standpoint alone, Forever Rain creates a soft and calming exit from the playlist. And while the first 3 songs are linked through urban imagery, the last 3 all use the imagery of rain. And then there are of course a lot of interconnected meanings and lyrics, one part leads into the next. It's amazing that the playlist sounds very coherent, however it never gets boring. New concepts and sounds are always brought in, and still there is this overarching vibe and tone, both musically and lyrically, that makes it one. None of the songs use big, surprising or loud sounds. It's not about flexing the flashy music production or rapping skills, but rather about creating a comforting feeling and distinct atmosphere. A lot of melody fragments are used repeatedly in the songs, which make them so comforting because they reuse what is known. And the effect where sounds travel from one earphone to the other is used in almost all songs, which takes the listener into that scenery that is painted. Most of the time, Namjoon uses a slow register in which he talks very relaxed, and his voice in general sounds comforting as well. Namjoon said he wanted to make songs that would stick with people. I think he definitely did that. There are multiple reasons Mono as a whole is dearly beloved by so many. First of all, it's very thought through, consistent and harmonious, from the progression of the songs, the music in general, to the lyrics and themes. The attention to detail is also outstanding. Then there is the cover and the tracklist, which fit the monochromatic vibe and complement the theme of the album and the title. The fact that all of the tracks are written in lowercase letters, the handwritten cover, and the minimal marketing all add up to the vibe of the album. And the fact that Moonchild, badbye, uhgood, and Everything Goes are neologisms makes them feel more creative, personalized, and unconstrained than other titles. The 3 music videos reflect the songs perfectly without drawing too much attention to them, which would take away from the messages of the songs themselves. A big budget music video wouldn't have been coherent with the more personal touch of everything else. Even though the album has had success streaming-wise, it feels like an insider tip, like a personal thing between you and Namjoon. And in a way it is. Namjoon also said in his livestream that the playlist is a communication between him and us. He tells us that it's okay to not be okay, but that it's also going to be better. He lets us in his world and emotions, he tells us what he's been feeling and thinking, and by that he makes us feel and he challenges us to think and to interpret his words, to understand his complex emotions. Many people have written about what the album means to them, how it helped them in dark times. Here are some examples I found. It must be so gratifying to see how much of an impact your work has on people. And here are some comparisons what the playlist feels like to illustrate the effect it has on me. To me, Mono feels like a hug. I remember that being the association I had when I first listened to it. But it's also comfort food to eat when you're stressed and sad. It's Namjoon wiping your tears, telling you it's okay to cry and to be sad for now, and also assuring you that it's going to be better. It's like a hot bath, or like a rainy day on which Namjoon puts a soft and fluffy blanket over you and makes you some tea. It's him breaking your heart with his lyrics and then putting it back together. It's him sitting beside you in the darkness and crying with you. All these feelings can be felt without understanding the lyrics. Mono is the perfect example of how music transcends languages. The production of the music, the sounds and melodies, the scenery that it paints, and especially Namjoon's voice have such an effect on the listener. Regardless if they understand Korean or English or both or neither, you can still feel hugged in spite of having no clue what Namjoon is saying. Obviously, I will never experience Namjoon songs or any of BTS's Korean music like a native speaker would. Even with a lot of research, I don't grasp every expression correctly, or I may not get the context right. However, I still have this strong connection to it, and the effects it has on me are very real. And then, when you do look up the translation of the lyrics, you find that this playlist is a deeply introspective and beautifully written work of art in which Namjoon reflects on who he is. It's outstanding to me how vulnerable he actually makes himself and what kind of introspection he shares with the world, especially in the songs Forever Rain and Uhgood. And one reason it's so outstanding to me is because he changed so much from where he started. In the first years after BTS's debut, he was given this concept of a tough guy and the intimidating rapper. I feel like he was allowed to evolve from that, to mature and to find a truer version of himself, and to show that to the world. His first mixtape dealt a lot with his image as a rapper and was in large parts very angry and loud, and in some way a representation of this older concept given to him. Mono, however, is nothing like that. It's not RM speaking or Rap Monster or any idol version of himself. Instead, it's showing the imperfections, the fear and vulnerability of another human being who is sharing his shortcomings with the world. The fact that he changed his stage name to RM during the time he was working on Mono highlights the transition or growth he was going through. And he didn't stop growing, obviously. Namjoon said Mono was a very good representation of him as a person between the years of 2016 and the beginning of 2018, but that he ultimately changed and grew since then. And in an interview they did for their latest album B, he said,
는 사실 저는 제가 해보니까 이게 그래도 좀 오랜 시간 걸어와 보니까 그러니까 이제 뭔가 그 당시의 감정의 찌꺼기들을 모아서 만드는 약간 일기장 같은 것 같더라고요, 곡들이라는 게. 그래서 저는 이제 모노라는 걸 냈고 거기서 되게 한때 한참 이제 뭐 어떤 제 열등감이나 어두운 여러 가지를 쏟아낸 다음에 이제 그 다음 턴에 있는데 제가
It's interesting that he compares his music to a diary. The name of his studio, Archive, actually reflects that. It truly is an archive of his past experiences which he shares with the world. For years now, he is allowing us to hear his thoughts and observations about life and to watch him grow. And by doing that, he consoled so many people. This is the beauty of sharing one's vulnerability in art. To see the reflection of his growth in his music is beautiful. Like he said, he is in the next chapter now, and I'm so excited to see what he's going to create in the future. If you watched till now, thank you so much. It really means a lot. And if you liked what I did, please think about leaving a like, sharing the video with your friends, or even subscribing to my channel. And I would love to hear what Mono means to you. What meanings and messages did you find that I didn't? Please tell me in the comments. Tell me all your thoughts or criticism. And again, thank you so much.